Hello, everyone. This is Thomas Pepin NHL Talk. I'm Thomas Pepin, and let's talk about the NHL. So today, again, continuing the NHL expansion series, where we have a look at failed franchises as well as potential new franchises, failed franchises if they could work in a second or third attempt, and then new markets to see if they could work in their first attempt, or multiple teams within the same market, which happens to be what we're speaking about today, which is a second team in Montreal. So that's what we're having a look at to see if that could conceivably work. And just bear with me a moment to pull things up. All right. So, as I mentioned, we're having a look at Montreal having a second team, which, if you saw yesterday's stream, you would know that I believe that two additional franchises could work in the Greater Toronto area. And so, since that's the case in Toronto, could a second team work in Montreal? It seems quite possible, especially given what we saw yesterday. So that's what we're having a look at, and it definitely seems like a reasonable thought. So, as per normal, we gather information to start, and then we kind of make conclusions towards the end there. So, to start, and this is interesting actually, is because the first thing that came to mind is if we do directly in Montreal, or if we would want to look at a surrounding area. I mean, in effect, it's going to be in the greater Montreal area. I don't know if it's called that, but would it be... It seems like it would be a bad idea to have it downtown, where the other one is. Oh, whoops, wrong thing. We want Canadian. But of course, you don't want it too far away. You want it a commutable distance, and so let's pull up Montreal on a map. So one thing I think, since we're on that thought, where the Laval Rocket are located. So is it in Laval? Where in Laval? That's one thing I'm interested to know. So, and if you're not aware, Laval Rocket, they're the AHL franchise for Montreal. So they do play at the Bell Arena. Wait. Is it the same name? What's the name? What's the name of the Montreal one? Oh, Bell Center and Bell Place. See, that's what I mean. Is like it just didn't make any sense. Okay, so it's a different rink, and it's in Laval. Let's look at its details here. So it's very recent, very new. It can only fit 10,000, which is not nearly enough to have a franchise. Could it be a temporary location for a second franchise? Yes, absolutely. So at the very least, we have a starting point where Montreal could work, because they have, like I said, at least a temporary location for the team. So that's interesting. Do they have them? No, they don't have them by size. Okay, I guess we'll have to do it back in Canada. Okay, so we've got Quebec City. Wow. I didn't even speak of this when I was talking about Quebec City, that the Videotron Center has enough capacity for an NHL team. So they're completely ready, that's for sure, in Quebec City. Okay, so yeah, the only one of any size outside of Quebec City and the Bell Center, I gotta get that right now, would be in Laval. So yeah, so it would be a temporary location if there was a second team. So next thing is, what does the census, so they do call it, oh, they just call it Greater Montreal, not Greater Montreal Area. So census metropolitan area includes quite a bit of space. So Laval and a lot of the larger populations in Quebec, the province. So it's quite a lot. So 4.2, 4.3-ish million is the population. Where is Laval? Because Laval is the second biggest city in the area. Let's check. Bell Center's distance to what was it? Bell Place? So 15 to 20 kilometers. So this is kind of like a similar distance to like when we're looking at the places in New York. So this, I think this was the distance, and on top of it you're crossing water. It looks like the same kind of thing, like an island and all that. So yeah, what was it? It was, would it have been Rangers to New Jersey? Anyways, it doesn't matter so much in this case, but essentially it's the same kind of concept as New York and Toronto, basically, because I mean, this is, we're doing the same kind of thing as what we did with Toronto, just only one team in this case. So okay, so the thing I dislike about Montreal having a second team already is the fact that they have a brand new rink that they made for an AHL team. And so to make another arena, I mean, Laval kind of makes the most sense. And to go and make a second rink in Laval, it just really doesn't really line up to begin with. One thing I want to check, let's check this. Yeah, let's just do Montreal. Because one thing I want to consider is maybe Laval's not the right place. Maybe it's another spot in Montreal. Okay, I think this is what we want to see. Where's the picture? That doesn't make sense. Okay, well, anyways, so the Bell Center is right near that little island, so it's going to be right down there. So there's lots of spaces, or lots of places, I should say, across the whole island, across the water. Yeah, there's connections directly across the water here. And then what's the most busy airport? Where is it located? So it's on the island there. Oh, that's the Pierre Elliott Trudeau one. So where is it here? So Pierre Elliott Trudeau Airport is the busiest one. Wait. Yeah, so it is the one there. And then, so it's Mirabel's the other one. Or the one that I think I remember. I don't know for sure. So Montreal Mirabel is there. Montreal Saint Hubert. Okay. So then maybe, I mean, based on the density, what you could do is have it even past Laval and over near that airport, Mirabel, because there's a dense population right over there anyways. So that also works. So I mean, there's a number of options. You could do it even on the other side. Uh, like I was mentioning, Longueuil. You could put it there. I mean, there's a bunch of different options. You could still put it on the main Montreal island there. Um, oh yeah, you guys might not see exactly what I'm looking at here, but now you could, I think, where I put it now. But anyways, so lots of options essentially is what I was getting at, and so I don't think it's absolutely like it kills the idea of a team there based on the Laval Arena already existing, because what you could do is have one or both of their AHL franchises in Laval. Anyways, lots of options is, and I don't think that's closed necessarily. Okay, so that considers that portion. Now, let's have a look at the numbers. So it's 4. So I guess, yeah, so that's kind of the reason why I started looking at that, is because we've got this population base, and how exactly do we divide up the population base? And in this case, it looks like essentially we just half it, because whatever the arena location is, they're both going to be right smack in the same area. So they're going to directly compete for the same fan base. So whereas with Toronto, you had Mississauga a little ways away, and then Hamilton even further away. So this one, it's two teams directly competing in the exact same area, just because of the geography of Montreal. So in that case, we take this and divide it by 2. Now we want hockey registration, which I don't believe Quebec has anything split up. No. So then what it's going to be is like I did with give me a second, I want to make sure. Yeah, so it's going to be the same thing as what I did with Toronto, which is basically we take the total registration divided by the total population, and then you get the rate. And so it's just going to be the same for everything basically. But again, it's Montreal, so it's apples to apples. It should be the exact same anyway. So so we want this. Whoops. Equals this divided by population of the province So 0.93%, and then that gets us registration. Minimum attendance. How do we get that? Ooh, good question. So we use Calgary for one and Vancouver for the other. Maybe what we do is use the weakest attendance of of the other teams. So essentially what I'm thinking of is using Ottawa. It's just I want to make sure that that makes the most sense. Let's compare Ottawa's attendance to some others. So it's only as of late that Ottawa's had trouble with their attendance, or at least has not had good attendance, I guess is a good way to put it. Calgary's been quite strong, so I don't think that's a good comparable here. And then Winnipeg's been relatively strong and consistent. So it looks like maybe Ottawa's a good example. What's Ottawa's metropolitan area? So 1.5 or so. And then Montreal divided by 2. So the other thing is we know that the Canadians are going to get better attendance no matter what if there's two teams there, just because of history and such. So it's going to skew towards Montreal, and then this new team would have probably a smaller attendance number. Is there a way to ratio this out? Are there any other places where there's two teams? No other competing teams. Anaheim, LA. They're very close. But I think, yeah, the population is just too big for that to really be accurate. Philadelphia, Pittsburgh are quite far apart. No, there's not really anything quite comparable. So I think then using worst case scenario from Ottawa makes the most sense. Again, it's close enough. The other thing to consider is that Ottawa is most similar to Montreal of all the options because Ottawa is directly on the border with Quebec, the province. And so it's essentially half and half Quebec, half Ontario. Um, so it's most similar of all the options to Montreal, but I mean, really, nothing's going to be perfect. Another thing, just out of interest, let's see about the Nordiques. So they were at capacity more or less with one team. The population base is larger because the greater or the metropolitan area for Quebec City is 840,000, where if we take the Montreal area divided by 2, we're still going to get 2.1 million. The actual amount is going to be less, like I said, because of Montreal, the Canadiens being an existing team, the super strong fan base, and then this is going to be a new one. So, that's interesting. I think, in effect, using Ottawa, the worst case scenario for Ottawa kind of seems correct. I think that's the best we can do, really. You don't want to overestimate because, well, okay, give me a sec here. So the low end for Ottawa is 14. So maybe what we'll do then is use Quebec's numbers. I think that's probably fair. I mean, because Quebec's numbers are going to be lower than Ottawa's. It's far back in the past, but it's Quebec City versus Ottawa, which is more similar to Montreal. It's a smaller market, but it's only one team. Ottawa's only one team as well, I guess. Yeah, let's just use Quebec's numbers because it's the smaller of the two. So let's say 13,666 at the small end. Actually, I can copy existing numbers here. So that saves a step. Capacity. Let's just say we use the same as Quebec City. And then what happened here? I don't know what happened, but I don't think... Oops. Yeah, I don't think it'll be impacted here. Then we can take these, drag it down. Oh, what we should use is okay, so we should use more recent numbers for the attendance. So give me a sec here. So we're going to compare it to 2018-19's numbers. Okay, so I think that's it then for data gathering. So we'll minimize this, and I think we can start speaking about everything. Let me just make sure that all the math is correct. One other thing I want to see here. How do you spell Coliseum? Iseum? Would we make it that small? Would the attendance be that low? Well, okay, in any case, we're going to do worst case scenario, so I think it's fine as is. So, all right, so like I mentioned, what we're doing for the total population base for the second team in Montreal is just taking the total metropolitan area's population and dividing it by 2, because both teams are going to be essentially in the exact same market. There's no difference whatsoever, whereas yesterday when we were speaking about Mississauga and Hamilton, Mississauga's separate from Toronto and Hamilton's even more separate. So that's where the fan bases are different in Toronto, whereas if there was a team in Montreal, it would essentially be the exact same fan base. So take the population divided by 2, that's the approximate population base to rely on to bring in fans to this new team. If we take the total hockey registration in the province of Quebec divided by the province's full population, you get 0.93% of the population, and then you translate that to the approximate hockey registration for the region, which would be that number, so the 0.93 times the population base for the team, and then you get the registration number. We'll come back to that in a sec for comparison. Again, attendance minimum, we decided to go with Quebec's minimum attendance. We use 2018-19 as the comparison year for the league average, both for max and minimum. And then the attendance max, we used Quebec City's maximum attendance, I believe. Capacity, we used Quebec City's as well. Yeah, we did. And then from there we have the rest. So now talking here about the registration. So what I think is good to do here is to compare this number to the registration of other places, because then we're going to have an idea of real approximate fan base strength. So compared to Hamilton and Mississauga, it's quite noticeably less. You compare it to Winnipeg, what we did there was the full province, I believe. So that's not quite accurate. Just give me a sec to make sure. Yeah, so we use the full province, and so that's not really a fair comparison. What's it similar to? So that's going to be, that's where Ottawa actually in the end, so if you compare it to Eastern Ontario's registration, which is essentially Ottawa, or the region, it's basically the same. So really in the end, what we could have done was used Ottawa as the example, because it's approximately the same potential fan base. The population's greater in Montreal, divided by 2 when compared to Ottawa, but so that's where it's going to be approximately the same. So really in the end, if Ottawa's safe, based on this number, it appears as though a second team in Montreal would also be safe. Because this team would be on the low end probably approximately the same as Ottawa. So in that case, it's starting to look more promising than I thought for a second team in Montreal. Now, on the low end, so the low end for attendance, clearly that's not good enough. Ottawa's, now that we know that really Ottawa's a good comparison, we can pull back up Ottawa's attendance. So this is a bit misleading because it's the COVID year. So 14,000 might be a more accurate estimation on the low end. And in that case, that's, I mean, it's stronger than Winnipeg's minimum, and I would argue that Winnipeg's the minimum, the minimum market that's capable of supporting a team in Canada. So if it's greater than Winnipeg, then it has to be strong enough to survive, it seems. And it's by about 2,000 fans difference. So, I mean, that makes it especially reasonable that it could succeed. Attendance on the high end, again, it's going to be approximately the same as Winnipeg, which is basically at your capacity for the team. Now, this is where you could argue that the capacity, you could make it greater. You could make it similar to what Ottawa has, which we'll get that number here in a sec. Is that right? So 19,000, I mean, that seems to be a bit too much, in my opinion. So you'd want something slightly smaller. But in any case, well, what were we saying? So maybe at the higher end, we're looking at something like 16,000. So really, what you could do is maybe the same size as what we were estimating for the additional teams in Toronto. So like a 17,000 person arena approximately. And so at the beginning, you'd probably estimate they wouldn't get up to there. Like I was saying, maybe 14,000 would be what they'd fill up to. And then with growth room up to 17,000 probably is what you'd want to aim at, just as a rough guess. So, but again, we were using Quebec City's numbers as kind of like a worst case scenario. And then so translating those numbers over here, the difference from minimum to capacity is 88.54%, which is, what's that similar to? Well, LA's minimum, but that's misleading because their capacity is a lot greater. But the minimum seems similar to what they'd have maybe as their minimum. In any case, maybe that's not the best thing to compare. So let's take a look at minimum versus league. So that's 78.29%. Is there anything that's even close to that? So Winnipeg, Atlanta, no. Anaheim, excuse me. So it's probably going to be better than Anaheim's worst. What else? Maybe around Houston's worst case scenario. So Dallas is essentially Dallas's worst case scenario. So I mean, on the worst case scenario side, it seems like Montreal would be fine. And so I think the best way to summarize then is more or less, if Montreal was to have a second team, it's probably most comparable to Ottawa's current performance. We've seen that Ottawa's done quite well in its better years. It's basically been at capacity most of those years, or all of those years. So on the high end, a second team in Montreal probably would perform similarly. And then on the low end, again, probably similar to Ottawa's. So in this case, if we're comparing it with Ottawa, and Ottawa's a sustainable team, then probably a second team in Montreal would be about the same. Now, one thing just out of interest, because it crossed my mind now, so Ottawa's the 28th valued team. So what you would have is, well, we know that it's going to appreciate from the sale of the team in all likelihood. The exact amount, it's difficult to know. So it's probably, but anyways, we're looking at worst case scenario. So it's probably going to be similar value, worst case, as a Winnipeg Jets or Ottawa Senators, their current valuation. So it's a sustainable team by that measure as well. So would it be a super strong market? Not really to begin with, it looks like. Would it be a perfectly reasonable market to have a team, yeah, it would probably be better than Florida's value and strength, Arizona's, Columbus's 30 ranked valuation. It's going to Buffalo 29th, so I mean it's probably going to be stronger than most of the weaker US markets, and so why wouldn't you go with a stronger market? So maybe what you would do, instead of having it as an expansion team, maybe you would keep it as an option for a relocation. That might be more suitable. It's the same thing with the second. Well, I was going to say the second expansion team or the third team in Toronto. Maybe what you do is Toronto gets a second team for sure in expansion, but the third team maybe is a relocation, and you save it for that. That's kind of what I would argue. I would say a second team in Montreal is probably very comparable to a third team in the Greater Toronto area. So is it an optimal option for an expansion team? Probably not. Is it one of the best options? Probably yes. So I'd put Houston ahead of Montreal's second team. The second team in the Greater Toronto Area also ahead of a second team in Montreal for obvious reasons. So it would probably be Houston, Hamilton, and then maybe Montreal after that. So far of the expansion options. And maybe, to be honest, you could even argue the third team in Toronto. But you know what? I'd say a second team in Montreal before a third team in Toronto. That's what I would argue, at least for now. So anyways, so basically, could Montreal have a second team? It looks like absolutely. I think so for sure. It just shouldn't be the league's first choice or one of the first two choices because of Houston and a second team in the Greater Toronto Area. But probably third place so far is what I would argue of expansion teams. Now, if we're going back and considering, for example, Hartford, I would say maybe to go with Hartford before a second team in Montreal, but it's kind of a coin toss, to be honest. To a fourth team in California, and the second team in that northwestern region of California, I'd probably still choose California just because of the amount of money in the States, and but it's close. It's right up there. It's really worthy of consideration, is what I would say, to have a second team in Montreal, and I think that's probably the best way to put it. Maybe third place, but it's a coin toss with all those teams for third place. So I think that's it. So we'll leave it there. If you like the stream, hit the like button, share with your friends, subscribe, turn on notifications. Otherwise, channel homepage has upcoming streams. Should be 3 p.m. Eastern daily, except for Sundays. And, well, as you saw today, about 15 minutes late. So sometimes that can happen. Just have a look at the channel homepage to see right before the stream if there's any delays. Any comments, leave them in the comments. Suggestions, same thing. And so tomorrow's Sunday. We're off tomorrow, and then we're back on Monday. And Monday we are talking about. Give me one sec to double check. Monday we're going to talk about a second team in Vancouver or in Victoria, British Columbia. So, yeah, so that's what we have up next. So, once again, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys Monday.